My name is Christie Arkovich, and I am a Tampa, Florida attorney. I specialize in student loans. We do bankruptcy, foreclosure, things like that too. I've been wanting to record this video for a while. And so we have a lot of clients who come to see us. They make good money, but they're still not able to address their student loans. They can't make their student loan payments. They're robbing Peter to pay Paul. They're still living a paycheck to paycheck lifestyle. And so I want to record a video on some of the things that I like to tell our prospective clients on how to address this. And so there's a few topics I'm going to cover. Refinance tips, the differences between consolidation and refi. That's usually two terms that are commonly misinterpreted. Co-borrowers, that's a huge problem nowadays, what to look for. And then finally, I'd like you to continue listening to the end because I'm going to offer a few reasons of why you should never consolidate or never refinance. And that is a particularly important thing because we've seen a lot of clients do the wrong thing. They never knew that there was this issue and they're just shocked that they were allowed to do it without realizing that they actually kind of shot themselves in the foot by doing something. So stay tuned to the end to hear why you should not refinance your loan. So first of all, talking about consolidation versus refinancing. Those terms are somewhat interchangeable. Consolidation is usually a term that's used when you are doing a federal loan. You're basically wrapping it all into one. You might have 10 or 20 different loans. Maybe they're the older loan type fell, and you want to combine them and make them with one servicer. It's particularly useful for organization, know what you have, income-driven plans so that you can deal with one servicer and figuring out what your one payment would be for those. Importantly, though, what consolidation does not do is it doesn't really lower your interest rate. It's market weighted to what you had before. It's basically an average of what the prior loans was. So nowadays, we have clients who make good money, but they don't want to give it all to the student loan company. I mean, they've worked very hard to get to this point in their lives, and they just can't do that. So there's issues about, federal loans, the interest rates are pretty high. They average 6.8%. For all federal loans, the average national is 6.8%. In today's market, that's exceptionally high. I mean, now we're starting to see the interest rate increases from March, but prior to that, we've had years now of 2% mortgages, 3% things, and it's only recently that they've started to turn. So there's issues about whether or not you want to take what's a national average of 6.8. Maybe you went to grad school and the rate's closer to 8.25 or 8.5. You might be able to reduce that in half easily by refinancing it. But the problem with the refinance is that you're taking it out of the government's realm. It's no longer a federal loan. And so what happens is you're losing your governmental protections. There's many protections, but if you're not eligible for them, then this could be something that you want to do. What those protections are is public service loan forgiveness. In the past, it didn't really mean much because there was so much wrong with that program, but that has been fixed. Please, if you are public service, watch our video on public service loan forgiveness because in October, there was a fix that came out. As long as you do the right thing, you will get credit for all the prior years that you've had in public service. It's super important that you do some things before October to get credit for that, so be sure and watch our video. We actually have a 1-hour webinar that we did for Florida attorneys. Over 500 people showed up, massive attendance. Usually they get about 50. So that's kind of huge. But if you privatize your loan, you're giving up your public service loan forgiveness options, which is essentially tax-free forgiveness after 10 years of payments. You're also giving up the income-driven plans. And so what an income-driven plan is, for those of you who don't know, you probably know this, but just in case, you pay for 20 or 25 years. At the end of that time, anything that you still owe is forgiven. In the meantime, the payment's based on your income. It's generally based on discretionary earnings. So it's usually a pretty affordable payment. There are ways to use different tips and things to get it as low as you possibly can. We offer a lot of those tips in our consultations. They might be things like lowering your AGI, maybe the time of the year and some documentation that you use and things like that. But you're giving that up. There's no income-driven plans when you privatize your loan to a term loan, basically, a 5-year loan, a 7, 10, 20, whatever it is. You're also giving up lengthy forbearance. It's true, if you privatize your loan, there'll still be some forbearance, but it's usually 3 months versus years that you might have in the federal system. You're giving up in-school deferment where you have 0 payments. You're giving up disability protection. There are a few disability plans out there that govern private loans. Not that many. We run across them every now and again. But the federal program, the TPD, Total and Permanent Disability, is something that's working quite well. We file a number of those for our clients. We have not lost one yet. And so that is a very, very important program. It's presently tax-free. So if we have someone in their 50s, 60s, or some kind of health conditions, cognitive issues, things like that, that they can't work full-time doing what they used to do, that's usually something a way out of those loans, a discharge in full of those loans with tax-free forgiveness. So I think that's very important. If you think that you might qualify, please see us with a consultation. We also have a free video on the TPD program to tell you a little bit about that. And your servicers are not going to give you this information. Importantly, at the beginning and end of our consultations, I will usually ask our client, how did you learn of this disability program, for instance, if we're talking about that? I'd have to say that probably 99% have learned of it through something I've done. It's a podcast, it's a video, it's a something, and it's not come from their servicer. So unfortunately, the information is really not getting out there in a way that we'd like to see. But again, if you're privatizing the loan, you're giving up those options. So you have to think long and hard about whether you want to. But and one last thing, if you are a post-petition bankruptcy client, so in other words, you've previously filed bankruptcy, you now have a private loan, and they are asserting that you now have to start payments. By all means, you absolutely need to see a student loan attorney. There are a lot of things that we can do. They're too complicated for today's video, but they involve motions for discharge injunction, adversary relief, threats of an improper reaffirmation of that debt. There's all kinds of legal arguments that we can make that that debt may have in fact been discharged, even if the debtor didn't file an adversary proceeding way back in the day. And that was common. A lot of times folks didn't know to file them. Debtors' attorneys didn't really know what to do with student loans either. It was a big problem back in the early, mid, even late 2000s. We started filing adversary cases in 2015 and 16, and we were one of the very first ones doing it. So even today, we still have a lot of folks that have never heard of it, or if they maybe heard of it, they just don't know, what to expect or anything like that. So talk with someone who's knowledgeable about that. If you filed a prior bankruptcy, there are usually some really unique ways to get rid of that debt now. So besides giving up the government benefits, the interest rate, I talked about that being quite a bit lower. Another reason for private refinancing is it's a good way to get your co-borrower off the loan. A lot of times you have a parent or grandparent or an aunt or uncle or somebody who signed on that loan as a co-borrower. They're 100% jointly liable for that debt, same as you. And it is true that many student loan companies will have provisions that after 24 months of good standing, no kind of modifications and payments for 24 months, that they will offer to release a co-borrower. The problem is this: I don't see it happen. It's a unilateral decision. The student loan lender gets to decide at the end of the 24 months, do you have a good enough job? Have you been working there long enough? What's your credit score? What's your other debt? They get to make the decision whether or not they want to release that co-borrower. If I was them, I would never release a co-borrower. Why? That's the only reason I'm getting paid half the time as a lender, is to protect that co-borrower. So instead of relying on this possible happening of after 24 months, they'll release your co-borrower, you can take it in your own hands and do a private refinance and not have your co-borrower included. So that's a huge benefit a lot of times. There's always the methods when you refinance is a lot of times people are doing that when other things aren't working. Like for instance, the snowball effect, where you are paying the smallest payment, and then as soon as you have that one done and paid for, you take that amount and you apply it towards the next smallest, and you just kind of work your way through that. Perhaps that is a way that psychologically means a lot, because you're seeing the loans dissipate. They're going from 7, 6 to 5 and so forth. Another way is you can, of course, tackle the higher interest loans first. There's been problems with that. A lot of times you'll direct a servicer, apply my loans to B, apply my payment to B, not A, because lower interest rate. There's always been issues where the private student loan lender has not applied it to where someone has asked for it to be. And that's a constant reasserting 2 hours on the phone, trying to, get to the right rep to make sure that it's properly applied. It's just sort of a mess. So I'm not a huge fan of that. I don't have time to spend hours on the phone. I know you guys don't have time for that. You don't have to refinance all. If you have one particular loan that has a great interest rate, leave it. Refinance the rest of them that have higher interest rates. And that's a good way that you can control it, because it'll be different companies, so that you have absolutely no way that that first company can go and apply it to whatever loan that they want to. What you'll need to look at is the rates, of course, variable and fixed. One of the first things that you should look at. It's very risky getting into a variable loan at the beginning of an interest rate hike, year that we're expecting to have this year. I think I would much prefer fixed with the 5 or 6 interest rate increases that we might expect this year, and perhaps more next year. Eventually they'll stop, and maybe it'll go back to low interest again, but you really don't know. So sometimes having a fixed loan gives you more control. You need to have a good job. Credit score needs to be, 650, 680 or so to be good. Above 750 is excellent. You can also do multiple refinancing. So if you do one when your credit score is in like the mid 600s, and you're able to bump your score to mid 700s or low 8s, then you might want to do another refinance. You possibly would get a % or 2 lower. It's certainly worth looking into. And then debt to income ratio, of course, is what they look at. You never want your debt to income ratio to be higher than 43%. That's the highest I've ever seen. So when you're looking for doing a refinance, the lowest rate, that plays a significant role. But you don't just look at the lowest rate. You also want to look at other things, the repayment terms, for instance. There's a number of different companies. I particularly like SoFi, Earnest, Common Bond is another good one. The first two and then the third are typically ones that I would recommend to a client looking to refinance, to look at what those companies offer. SoFi, I think, has won some awards on being the best overall private refinancer. They have good repayment terms. They have unemployment protection. That's one of the features I particularly liked with SoFi, is that unemployment protection. So if you reach out to them, be sure to ask, what exactly is that? How long does it last? How do I qualify? What kind of documentation do I need? Things like that. Earnest, they have a skip a payment plan. You can skip one payment every 12 months. That's wonderful. Things happen, and that's a good way to kind of build that in. Like I mentioned, all of them usually have much shorter forbearance periods. It's usually like 3 months instead of years. There'll be the fixed versus variable. You'll be looking for a term loan. So it'll be 5, 7, 10, 15, 20 years. A lot of our clients really like that. The problem is out there with student loans overall is we've gone to what was once a 10-year repayment period. I mean, when I graduated in 1992, which was law school, I was on a 10-year repayment plan. And back then, the tuition costs weren't that high, and it was easy for me to repay those loans. I got a job. I graduated in like a small recession, but it wasn't that big a deal. And it was perfectly fine. But nowadays, we see people often on a 30-year plan, more often than not, but they don't realize it. A lot of folks, they don't see what the end date is, or they don't recognize, they don't do the math and see that it's 30 years out. 30 years is the vast majority of someone's career. I mean, 30 years, a lot of times people retire at 25. And so that means you would have been paying your student loan during your entire working career. And that's usually to the exclusion of other things. You can't afford the house, the family, the business, the things that you might have done otherwise if you have this huge student loan over 30 years. When you're looking at a payment restructuring for 30 years, it's like a house where you pay 2 and possibly 3 times what your original purchase price is, because the mortgage is 25, 30, or even 40 years out. So be cautious about that. Sometimes you get a better rate of interest if you have a shorter term, just like a mortgage. The 15-year terms are usually a little bit less, like a point or so less than a 30-year term. Same thing goes for student loans. If you can choose a 5, 7, or 10-year, it's usually a lot better than a 20 or 25 or 30-year. And they don't usually go 30. I think the longest I've seen for a private student loan, I think it's been 20. They may do 25, I'm not sure, but I think it's been 20. Many of them have auto pay, 25%, 0.025 reduction per month if you put it on auto. Fantastic. Most of them don't have origination fees. You need to ask if they have a prepayment penalty. Many do not. You need to find out if they do any compounding. If they do run, compounding is it's the problem out there. What happens is folks with student loans, they call their servicers. They find out that, hey, there's a problem. I can't make my payment. What do you recommend? Forbearance. Okay. Forbearance is a capitalizing event, which means at the end of forbearance, say it's 1 year, 1 month, whatever it is, any accrued interest is then added to the old principal balance. that capitalization of interest compounds interest. And that's how you end up paying so much interest and accruing so much interest on these loans. So try to stay away from loans that compound. That is an extremely negative event. Some of the refinancings, they require a degree that you finish your education. Some have cash bonuses if you transfer from one company to another. Think of it, it's a business to them. It's a business model. They're increasing their loan portfolio if they bring you in. You're their customer. And then some of them have a max borrowing amount. Education loan finance, they don't have any kind of max refinance amount. So if you have huge numbers, you might think about going to SoFi, who targets professionals who usually have huge numbers, or the education loan finance. But importantly, I want to talk about why you want to, or what things you should consider before you refinance and why you might not want to. If you filed a prior bankruptcy, then reach out to a student loan attorney, for instance. We had a case just recently where a client, they had filed bankruptcy with someone else in some other state years ago. And then several years after, the private student loan lender called them and said, hey, your student loan's due, it's $1,000 a month, whatever it is. That person consolidated their loan for a lower payment. They basically did a refinance, is what it was. It was called a consolidation, but it's technically a refinance. And so, yes, they got a lower payment, but they had this huge debt post-bankruptcy. So forward again, several years later, they reach out to me. And they can't make this payment. So they're asking what their options are. Well, we realized that the first loan was essentially included in that bankruptcy and should have been discharged. And we alleged then that the further refinance or consolidation is what they called it after the bankruptcy was probably a reaffirmation violation, a post-discharge injunction. I mean, this was a pre-petition debt. This was money that they owed before the bankruptcy that was then turned into a different debt after the bankruptcy. There was no notice to the court. There was no approval by the court. These are processes that have to be taken to protect the consumer for accidentally re-signing back up on debt that was included in the bankruptcy. So fast forward to the end, that client ended up with a large sum of money. We ended up getting our attorney's fees paid by the other side, and that private loan is entirely gone, completely gone. Don't have to worry about it. So if you had a prior bankruptcy, there's usually some good options. They're complicated, but they have tremendously great results. Now, another thing is, let's say that you have other debts or this debt and you think a bankruptcy might work. Well, then talk with a bankruptcy attorney. That's something that you might not want to do a refinance right before you file bankruptcy. There are look-back rules. Plus, you also have a situation where the lender that you have the debt with now is maybe someone that we can do a lot more good for you in that bankruptcy than if we refinance it with brand new paperwork that might fix some problems. There was a settlement here in January. 39 attorneys general, however you say that, settled with Navient. And interestingly, and kind of an aside, Navient agreed as part of the reforms in that case to refrain from telling people that private student loans were non-dischargeable in bankruptcy. I like to get that out there because a lot of private lenders say that. They say, oh, your debts are non-dischargeable in bankruptcy. They actually have it written into the account agreements that are signed. That's not true, okay? Number one, you can't agree to a pre-petition bankruptcy waiver. It's not something you can agree to. It's like waiving unemployment insurance. You can't do that either in most cases. So those statements are technically wrong from the very beginning. It's also something that they've never counted on it. Many of these lenders have told their own investors through SEC documents, through the Security Exchange Commission, that these debts are potentially dischargeable in bankruptcy. If they're required to tell their investors that, but yet they're saying the exact opposite to their borrowers, how much can they really rely upon that? So there's some reliance issues. But most importantly, the case law. There's been case after case in the last few years that have allowed for these debts to be considered non-qualified education loans and thus something subject to bankruptcy. And so in that 39 attorneys general settlement with Navient, not only did they agree to refrain from telling people that debt's non-dischargeable in bankruptcy, but if you are eligible for that settlement, then by all means, you don't want to refinance your debt to someone else and take yourself out of that settlement. And so we did a specific video on what the settlement was, the 4 or 5 things that make you eligible. Basically, you have to have gone to a certain school, you have to live in a certain state, one of the 39. You also have to have been 7 months delinquent as of last June, so basically loans that were in default. And the loan has to have been originated by Sally Mae and be of a certain date, 2002, I think, and thereafter. The video has the specifics about that. But if you think you're eligible, then by all means, don't change anything right now. Let's see if that works, and you can contact us if you need further advice on that. If you're older and you think that you might be eligible for total and permanent disability and you have a federal loan, then by all means, don't refinance to a private loan. Even though it may temporarily reduce your interest rate, you're killing your option for a tax-free 100% discharge once you're not able to work full-time. So that's a huge life event and something you don't want to give up, that federal protection there. And my screen just blanked out, but there's a couple other reasons here I want to talk about. Let's say you need income-driven plans. Let's say that your employment is good, but it's sporadic. You don't always have that good employment. Well, privatizing your loan to where you have a payment due each and every month with very limited forbearances and no income-driven opportunities, so it would go up and down based on your income, that's pretty risky. So if you're commissioned, commission sales or anything like that, then be cautious about doing a private plan unless you have a lot of backup resources in case the well runs dry for a few months. And then lastly, if your circumstances present some kind of hardship, whether that's a family hardship, a health hardship, not able to get a job, or something that makes enough money to maintain a minimum standard of living plus pay the student loan, then you might have some options, whether it is to discharge the debt in bankruptcy, whether it is to settle the debt outside of court. You might not want to consider refinancing when you could look at those settlement options instead. When we settle a private student loan debt, for instance, we're generally not paying full dollar. We're usually paying somewhere between 20 and 50 cents on that dollar. And then often it's 0% interest or maybe 1 or 2%, a very low number. So that's something that is important. And if your circumstances warrant that, you want to try that avenue first. And then last before least, we are expecting some bankruptcy changes. The Secretary of Education announced in a March 9 tweet that they gave permission basically for all of their local attorneys that represent the government to stay a case if a borrower asked. And we believe the reason for that is because we expect some significant changes to come about that would affect that borrower in a bankruptcy setting with their federal student loans. We don't know what it is yet. We don't know exactly when it's going to come. My suspicion is that we're going to know sometime in August, perhaps, because the repayment start date for federal loans has been extended to August 31. It's more than likely that that is going to be continued again. We do have midterm elections just a couple months after that. An ideal date of restarting repayments would be the end of the year or perhaps middle of next year. Personally, I might have wanted to restart now just to start getting that taken care of because, again, there's income protection. So if someone's not making an income, there are ways to address that. But that's neither here nor there. The important part is that we're going to have something come out this fall, probably. It's probably going to involve bankruptcy. So if you think you may have some options there, then maybe don't look to refinance the loan right now. Maybe just hold off and wait just a short time. Contact us if you have some concerns about debt collection actions that are being taken in the meantime or anything that's going on. We have a lot of free resources that are available on our website, which is ChristieArkovich.com. We have a free YouTube channel, Student Loan Sidebar. I do short videos like this talking about different things, different programs that are coming out or that have come out, who it affects, things like that. On our website, we have a quarterly cram down article that we do for our local bankruptcy bar association. And then there's just all kinds of things in our blog and things like that. So keep informed. That's the best way to deal with your student loan. The head in the sand approach only helps the other side. So if you have questions, we do one-on-one consultations. If you need further advice, if those free resources aren't getting the answers that you need. And thank you for your time today. And don't forget, student loans suck. Have a good one. All right. Bye-bye.